All right, grasshoppers. He's back. The wrestler. Who's the wrestler with the Fu Manchu?
Oh man. I'm not Hulk Hogan, that's for sure.
Hulk Hogan. Yes, right.
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan is back. The big Hulkster is back.
I'm more
How
like
you doing
Ben
there?
Hogan.
All right, just a little quick introduction. I know I've introduced him before, but this is Mark Puttenvink, a good friend of mine. I really respect him a lot, his knowledge and training and the mental and physical part of it. He'd been a strength and conditioning coach of the Rangers, and that's how we didn't know each other then, but that's how we ultimately connected. So actually, Mark, if you guys remember, I was involved in this swim across the Hudson with a bunch of Navy SEALs, and that's Mark got me into meeting these guys, and he actually trained them and make sure they were all ready to go so they could swim across the Hudson. So good man here, very knowledgeable. A very handsome man too. I mean, it's just like having him on. It's like Studley, man. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Good. So we got an interesting topic today. So when I was training to be on the TV show Survivor, I had a buddy of mine who was a trainer, and he would do things. I don't know if I think I've told the story before, but he would do things. He'd have me memorize a poem, and I would be able to recite the poem verbatim. And then he would have me do something to elevate my heart rate and my breathing, either riding a bike, or he would have aggravated me, something to just get my heart rate going and everything. And then I'd try to recite the poem again, and I couldn't do it. So I didn't, first of all, I didn't recognize that was happening to me. And then once I recognized it was happening, okay, what do I do about it now? How do I slow down my breathing so I can calm myself down? And so it's interesting. I know we want to talk about that, as how your breathing really affects your mind when it's elevated like that, right?
Yeah. So two things. Your breathing is correlated to your heart rate, because increased breathing is a result of you've used up a lot of energy, and aerobically you've got to replenish that energy. So if you do a sprint, you run down the end of the track and you get to the end, you're out of breath. Well, that's because you've used up all the stored, we'll call it sugar, it's glycogen, the glycolytic pathway. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but you've used all that up. Now, to replace that energy source, we breathe heavy, because that's the aerobic part of the recovery. So what do we find out when the heart rate is elevated? That we lose some complex motor skills. A really great way to think of it is, if you're rushing to get in the house to answer a phone and the front door is locked and it's a call you're waiting for and you're fumbling with your keys. Now, you've opened that door literally hundreds of thousands of times with no problem. But because your heart rate's up, because you're excited, you want to get in there to get to that phone call, you're fumbling and you can't get the door open. So that's what occurs in sport as well. As we elevate our heart rate, we start to lose some of our complex motor skills. And
but it's mental too, right? It's not just the physical part of it.
It's a combination, but there is a definitive breakdown in complex motor skill when the heart rate gets above 145 beats. And we know through tons of research that a typical hockey shift, you're about somewhere around 80 to 90% of your maximum heart rate, sometimes maybe 95%, but in general, it's 80 to 90%. So if you do the math, you're at, you're probably reaching that 145 beats per minute or in excess of that. So, I mean, it's for a very brief period of time, because now you're going to the bench and you're going to breathe heavy. Your heart rate's going to come down, and then you're ready to go out for your next shift. One of the things that we can utilize is something called tactical breathing. It's something that they use in the military, Navy SEALs in particular. And what that is a way to calm your mind down, as you spoke to, and also reduce your heart rate. And the way that works is it's a 4-count process. And we call it box breathing also. So imagine you have a box. I'm going to go up one side of the box on a 4-count. I'm going to breathe in. I'm going to go across the top of the box, hold my breath, and then a 4-count exhale. And just keep repeating that process, 5 or 6 times. And you're going to feel everything settle back into place. Your heart rate's going to come down, and your mind's going to settle as well.
It's amazing that's what I did during that training. It's amazing how I didn't know that at all when I was playing, but it just made so much sense, right? So physically, for me too, it's also psychological, because you're aware my heart rate is elevated. I'm doing something to bring that heart rate down now, and you're physically doing it by the breathing, right? So it's to me, when you're in the middle of a competition. And that was the point, when I was for Survivor, was that we would do a physical portion of a challenge, and then there'd be a puzzle always at the end. And it was to be going through the physical part of it, recognize that now your heart rate's elevated, slow yourself down, do the breathing, and then now go on to usually the puzzle at the end. And just the fact that you recognize that was happening, I think really made a big difference too.
Well, in fact, it's a great point about. I like what they did with the physical and the mental because Vasily Lomachenko, he just lost the title, but he's like one of the top fighters for quite a while now. He's Ukrainian, and they have a very unique way of training. I mean, they're very scientific. So he does his bag work, he does some sparring, whatever it is in terms of boxing and his conditioning work. Then he goes into the back room in his gym, and he's got a series of mental tasks. So on one wall, he'll have like, I don't know, it's a half a dozen, looks like a calendar, but the numbers are all scrambled up. And he's got to start from 1 and get to 24. He's got to point them out like this. And then he'll move over to the table, and there's a series of, it looks like he's playing with blocks, but it's a mental task. And what it's doing is it's conditioning him in a condition of physical, not duress, I don't want to use the word, but he's used up all his physical energy to still be able to maintain his thinking. And it's really important. If you think about any sport, you get into the third period of a game, and there's some decisions you have to make on the ice. And of course, you want to make good decisions. If you're physically tired, you want to be able to still make the mental process correct. So that's why the box training becomes very important. One of the other trainings I learned from Bill Brown, who you met, he's a team guy. They do a drill called a light switch drill. So you start off, you can pick any exercise. We'll use push-ups, and you start off going real slow, right? And then I'll say, pick it up, and you got to go really fast, and then I'll say, hold it. And when you get to that hold it point, if you're a hockey player, the coach would say, Tom, first forward back in his zone goes to where? And you got to think, right to the net. And then you pick up the drill again, you start going real slow and then fast, and you keep doing this. And what it does is it kind of makes that connection, and it's really great for hockey because the hockey's not a linear sprint. You go, as we discussed last week, you're going to go fast, and you're going to glide a little bit. You may even stop because you're going to transition, go the other direction. So it's a really specific drill, and it's a great drill to utilize.
And do you think it goes even in the workplace or something? Maybe it's home. There's a lot of other, even if it's not sports, right? Now you're maybe not physically exerted, but you may be in a confrontation with somebody. You're in a meeting, you're going back and forth, you're negotiating, the tempers get going a little bit, and now your heart rate is elevated from that now too, right? So now that's making you not think clearly, the same kind of thing. So you can still use that same training in that situation. Just say to yourself, okay, calm down, like recognize that it's happening, calm yourself down, control your breathing, and now your brain starts functioning better, right? Now you're making better decisions. Like we all are like that, right? I mean, you get into a heated discussion in a meeting, and you say some things, you go, oh God, why did I say that, right? It's because your mind wasn't working as effectively because your heart rate was elevated so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Think of just in the vernacular of our language. When everybody gets excited, hey, let's all take a deep breath here.
Yeah.
And that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
That's truly the way it is. One of the other things I stumbled across, Tom, in my research, and I don't know if it's practical, it may be practical at the youth level, but they're finding that if you stand as opposed to sitting after your shift, your recovery rate is much it's a lot better than it is when you're sitting.
Really?
Yeah. It's a form of active rest, and it's a better function of recovering than, and I don't think it could work at the professional level because the coaches have to, but it's something to think about for sure.
What would be the theory about that the blood flow is better throughout the body or something?
Yeah, it's an active rest. So instead of sitting down, where actually all that blood's going to pool in your legs, if you're standing and even kind of like just moving your legs in place slowly, it's an active rest, and you're going to recover quicker because we do build up a little lactate. Every shift we take, we're building up lactate. So we can flush a little bit of that out with an active rest.
And don't you think too, like, okay, as you retrain, obviously, so part of training so that the effects of your elevated heart rate don't affect you as much. Well, you train to get in better shape, right? You ride the bike, you do sprints, you do long distance stuff, all that stuff. But don't you think you can do that the same thing with your mind too? To like be aware that that's happening to you, is like get that automatic mechanism now says, okay, I'm tired. Now I need to know. I don't have to think about it too much. I immediately need to go into that box breathing or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's called SIT training or situational inoculation training. And what it means is learn a skill set, whatever it is, okay? A very simple gross motor skill set until you really have it defined. Then add stress to that environment so that you are mentally able to handle that stress and still perform that very simple task. And it's used in the military, and it's used in combat and self-defense. So maybe an example, we spoke about this the other day. So you said you're turning to go in the corner to retrieve a puck, and you run that drill for like 15 or 20 evolutions with a player. Now put two guys hard on him. So he's stressed, and now he's got to perform. And it's just a matter of getting in that comfort zone so that two things don't occur. Your heart rate doesn't get completely jacked up, and you also don't get mentally stressed by it.
Right. So let's say we've got a young athlete and it's off season and they're training for the upcoming season, and you want to address that issue of, being able to have those 45 to a minute burst of energy and being in the best shape for that. Now you're going to recover, but then you go back out again, another burst of energy. What's the best training for that?
Well, the best training is anaerobic threshold training, and that's why it's really important for the youth player or the professional player to get with someone who's really qualified and knowledgeable, who can lay out the off season for them. Because generally and it has to do with work to rest ratio. So think of a typical shift is, 45 seconds. And again, you go back to the bench for maybe 2 to 3 minutes. And so you got to more or less a 1 unit of work to 3 units of rest ratio. What you want to do is start off your off-season training in that capacity. And then maybe 2 months before camp, go to 1 unit of work to 2 units of rest.
So, okay, so you may be riding the bike. You may be riding the bike or sprinting or whatever.
Yes.
So you're trying to do closer to a max effort for 1 unit, say 45 seconds, and slow down the bike and for 3 times that. Okay.
And so what it's going to do, Tom, early off season is going to be 1 unit of work to 3 units of rest. Right. After about 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks of that, it's 1 unit of work to 2 units of rest. And then only a very brief period before training camp, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, maximum 3 weeks, 1 unit of work to 1 unit of rest. So what? Okay, so what's the length? So would somebody do that ratio for like a 30-minute? It's brief. It's brief. Yeah, it's so again, early on when you're doing that 1 unit to 3, you can do longer duration. So you in terms of your work output and also how many reps and sets you do, and it shortens. So that when you get to that, so the 1 unit of work to 1 unit of rest is the actual anaerobic threshold training. And anaerobic threshold simply is when your body produces enough lactate that the muscle can't function any further. Right. It hits the wall, so to speak. But you can push back that anaerobic threshold on the timeline by doing that type of training. So where you used to go, say, 10 seconds with an all-out effort before muscular fatigue set in, you can now push it out to 12 or 14 or 15 seconds. So does it have to be some form of biking or running? Can you do bench pressing, let's say, for 45 seconds? You can, but that's specific to the bench press. So we want to do things that are going to involve the total body. So that's why the bike, or I personally, running and sprinting, that's really the best way to go. Yeah. Right. So is there any purpose, like for an athlete that's performing in a sport where you have those short bursts of energy, with most sports are that? I mean, obviously, if you've got long distance running, it's different or whatever. Is there any advantage then to an athlete doing long distance running, like just going out for a jog for an hour? Well, there's always an advantage to it. It's better to do than do nothing. But right. In terms of, so once you're in shape, it would take 12 weeks of total immobilization. And let me backtrack. 12 weeks of not training, I should say, to lose your aerobic base. But keep in mind that if you're doing sprint work, it's nonlinear. So you do a sprint, you rest, and then you sprint, and then you rest. Now, the sprint is anaerobic, so it's powered by sugar. We'll keep it simple. The rest is powered by oxygen. So it's anaerobic burst, aerobic recovery. So when you're doing this multiple anaerobic burst, aerobic recovery, you're still getting a continuum of aerobic activity that keeps your aerobic base in place. Right. And I think it's important for people to know too, listen, if you don't have access to a trainer or you don't have access to a stopwatch even, and you're some young athlete that's just getting going, you could do something simple as using telephone poles on the roads where you're running. Correct. Right. So run full speed to 1 telephone pole and then do slow it down for 3 telephone poles and do that same thing over. You can really simplify. If you really want to do it, again, it's ideal to have a trainer that really knows what he's talking about. It's ideal to have the proper equipment, but you can always figure it out some way to do it, right? Oh, absolutely. There's actually, the Swedes came up with a system years ago. It's kind of a funny name, but it's after the doctor who kind of put it together. It's the Fartlek, Fartlek method. And it's really simple. Yeah, I know. You just made that up. You just made that up. Yeah, I did. Yeah. But what it is basically what you said, telephone pole to telephone pole, or go to the track, sprint, jog, walk, sprint, jog, and like just go to no particular time, but just do it as you feel it, and it's quite effective.
Yeah, definitely.
So
last week, just real quickly, we brought up we were talking about sleep, and you and I were both of the opinion that a lot of it was psychosomatic. The back-to-back games saying you had a disadvantage, and we had a really interesting viewer or listener really questioned us on that, and you responded very well. And I think it's important to note that we're not ever disputing the science that says, listen, if you played a game the night before, there's no question you're going to be more fatigued. Things, and just as we're talking here, there's no question the science tells us that if you're exerted yourself for that 45 seconds, your motor skills and everything are not as great. But what we're saying is that still doesn't mean that you can't work even harder or be more focused on those occasions, because you recognize that your body and your mind are not going to be as strong. In fact, it was funny because I think it was Saturday night, might have had a little bit too much fun, didn't get as much sleep. And I was going to the gym on Sunday morning, and I noticed myself that I recognized the fact that, yes, I was more tired than I normally am. So on the way to the gym, I was getting myself fired up because I knew I had to counter the fact that my body was not going to be as strong as it was. And I had a fantastic workout because I was so focused. It's almost like, and I'm not suggesting this, but it's almost like you sometimes train better when you're more tired, right?
Yeah, that gentleman by is Brendan Duffy, and we had we had a conversation online. He obviously knows what he speaks to, and he's correct. Yeah, sleep is a huge part of our lives, whether it's athletics or not. I mean, there's all kinds of studies showing industrial accidents are so much higher when workers don't get the proper sleep they need. Car accidents, and any kind of mental lapse that results in something catastrophic. More often than not, there's a lack of sleep involved. I think what we were speaking to is what you said, Tom. Sometimes, the Rangers playing the Devils, there's no time constraint to the recovery, except that maybe there is, because the guys are going out afterwards. Because when you're on the road, and you know how it is, you fly home from Montreal, you get back to Westchester, it's like 3 or 4 a.m. and you go straight to bed. But when you get out the rink in New York or New Jersey, and it's 1, you might or midnight, you might go out a bit. Yeah, right.
And I agree. Like whether it's sports or business, I think that's an important thing. Like to be if you want to be successful at what you're doing, you're going to face times where maybe you've taken a red eye or whatever it is in the business world, but then you've got to get some work done. And to just say, well, I'm tired, I won't be able to have as good a day today. You're going to fall behind, because that really driven person is going to say, I'm tired, yes, but that doesn't mean I still can't perform today. I will make sure that I'm more mentally into it today than I am on a normal day, because I need to be. I need to push myself farther today because I am more fatigued or whatever it is. So that's important. Yeah,
that's the 40% rule applies there too, because many times when we think we've reached maximum effort, that's only 40%. We still have 60% left to go.
Yeah. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
And this isn't a knock on anybody. We're all the same. You and I are in the same boat. We never come close to using both mentally and physically what we have inside us, right?
Absolutely not. I think you and I discussed a few years ago, I did a fundraiser for homeless veterans where I boxed 60 straight rounds. I didn't stop. And on its face, you go, there's no way you did it. And even now when I look back upon it, I say, yeah, it's kind of weird. But I did do it. And people said, well, how I said, well, I trained for it. So I during the week, I would get up to 30 rounds twice a week. So I thought if I could do that, then mentally, the 40%, I can get to the 60. And I also looked at it like when I got there was some media there and a lot of friends and support and veterans. Once I started, I couldn't stop, so you just do it till you're done. Yeah.
And the reality is you probably could have got 65 if you had to, right? If you said you could do 65, you probably could have got it.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, because even in the gym, you notice where, okay, I'm going to do 5 sets of 12. So you get to the 12 and you quit. But the reality is you can still go beyond the 12. I mean, you're planning the workouts for a reason in a certain way. But
what I would also often do when I'm training guys is, say you're in a squat rack and your previous max is picking number 300. And mentally you're struggling to get past that. I'll load up the plates so that they're not even. So you know what I mean? But I'll put 305 on and not tell you. And you'll do it, and I go, you just did 305.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, if you didn't know, there's no question. Like even the site where you're benching, and if you don't have a spotter, Like, you pull back, and then you should do that because it's not safe when you don't have a spotter. But you can go beyond that. But you think, oh God, I better not, because I drop it on my face. If I have a little bit of a problem here, yeah, definitely
might be an improvement for some of us.
Actually, so that is it Brendan Duffy? That's what he set me up with a doctor. It's awful. I forget her name right now, but we're going to do a show on, I think it's Wednesday, and go over the.
There's over the years, Tom, for hockey or any kind of athlete that travels quite frequently, especially, coast to coast, there's been all kinds of research done on jet lag and how to handle it and ways to prevent it. And to be honest with you, they've come up with nothing. It's unavoidable. It really is. Yeah.
That's right too. Like they talked about hydration, which is obviously important, right? But that really doesn't solve the problem, does it?
No, the problem is just physiological. There's really nothing we could do about it. But I think that's where, as we spoke to a week or two ago about how the scheduled rest is so important for athletics.
Yeah.
Incredibly important.
I remember I was down at Virginia Beach and a bunch of Navy SEALs, and went to the guy's place that has a training facility there, which he's like everybody has studied sleep and nutrition and all that. And they really felt of all those things, nutrition, exercise, sleep was the most important thing for you.
No question.
So it is important. But it's funny though, too, and I don't doubt the science at all. But everybody knows I get up at 3:30 in the morning, but I'm usually at bed at 10 o'clock. So I get my 5.5 hours of sleep, but I feel fantastic. And I guess I'm just used to it now, or that's what, because I don't even think it's right. I mean, they say 8 hours is ideal, but I guess
7 to 8. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, some people operate on 4 hours.
Yeah.
And
they're fine.
Yeah.
Right. Like, do you think long term just going on 4 or 5 hours of sleep affects you in some negative way?
I'm not really well versed in it, but I would imagine it would. I think at a minimum you want to get 6 to 7 hours of sleep.
Some people have talked about I don't know if it's damage that's done to your brain, but I mean it's harder on your brain. Your brain needs that sleep to regenerate
it's recovery for both your brain and your body. We know that when you're sleeping, there's always a question of, well, if I don't eat till 9 p.m., is that bad? No, because your body metabolizes what you eat. It doesn't matter if it's 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. And in fact, when your body's metabolizing your food, you're burning energy. So you can be burning energy at night. Now, of course, if you eat at 9 and you live like I do and you do, then you can't eat until 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. Sickos. But it's funny, there's a lot of people too, we talk about the intermittent fasting. So for me, it's I stop at 8 o'clock and I don't eat again until noon. But a lot of people don't even realize they're basically doing that anyway. So they're just not eating breakfast, right?
Right. It's pretty simple if you just look at it that way. And and we talked about this too, but I just want to go kind of circle back to which seems to be a popular term nowadays, circle back. But anyway, the notion of doing your training in a fasted state. And if you do, so some people say, well, look, how am I going to I've got to be at my desk at 9 a.m. So I don't have time to train in the morning in a fasted state. But you really do. Yeah. There are things you could do in a 4 to 6 to 8 minute period that will absolutely, and it's anaerobic, all right, because you metabolize more calories anaerobically. Think of this. If you go on a treadmill for an hour, you're going to burn X amount of calories. And I know guys, and you probably do too, that have had contests, hockey players in the weight room, who can burn 500 calories the fastest.
Yeah.
And I know guys that have burned up 500 calories in 20 minutes doing a sprint workout on a bike or less. So.
And listen, I understand people's point where they say, I got to be in the office at 9 o'clock, and I get that. You got to be productive and everything. But I think we'll do things to train ourselves to be better at our jobs. So why not do things for your health, which will help you be better at your job as well? I think you and I both agree that the better condition you are, your brain gets conditioned better too. You're more healthy, you're more efficient, and you'll be better at your job. So if it means that you've got to get up a half an hour earlier or 45 minutes earlier, to me, that's all worth it, right? Even if you say to yourself, well, I stay up till 11 o'clock watching TV. Well, maybe turn the TV off and go to bed at 10:30 or 10 o'clock, right? Yeah. And get your hours now early in the morning. I know it's tough. I know people get stuck in routines and like that. But if you really, I think, switch the way you're looking at, again, like I said, your career is important to you. You get it. You've worked long and hard. You've gone to school. You got your career. But another thing that will help you with your career is if you are healthy mentally and physically too. So,
no question. One of the things that people may want to consider, and again, I'm not an expert. Brendan Duffy would speak better to this, but about shutting things down about a half hour before you go to bed so you get a better quality sleep. Certainly stay off any kind of electronics, because there's that the blue light that affects your circadian rhythm when you want to sleep. And also that includes television. Let your brain quiet down. Maybe read a little bit for the half hour.
Like, and in your case, I mean, you probably like spend about half an hour looking in the mirror before you go to bed, right? So maybe you stop
45 minutes usually.
45 minutes. Yeah. But this is a joke around. But like I say, I do think it's important to look in the mirror. If you're working hard at yourself, and you're making yourself better, take a look in the mirror and then don't look too long.
Yeah, I've always told people like that are trying to, get some kind of recomposition, if they're trying to lose fat or whatever, or add muscle, take a photo, stick it under your sock drawer, and then 6 weeks later, take another one, just put them side by side, or stand in the mirror. I mean, it's not.
And even with your even if you don't, it's not physically looking in a mirror. If you're working on your career or your grades or whatever, I think it's important along the way to stop and look and say, listen, I'm making improvements here. And you feel good about yourself. Keep going.
Well, it's validation of the hard work that you're putting in.
It's important, right? It keeps you going. If you don't validate the work you've done, you're going, why am I doing this, right? So,
exactly. Yeah.
All right. Once again, Patriot Training is your company?
Yeah. PatriotTrainingSystems.com is the website.
People go there. And again, I think sometimes people get a little bit intimidated if you're talking about training with boxers or Navy SEALs or whatever it is, or athletes. Mark can train anybody. There's no, good or bad. Nobody's going to be compared to anybody else. The whole idea is that it's just about getting better from where you are now to the next day. So.
Absolutely. Be a better you than you were yesterday. That's what we talked about.
Definitely. All right, bud. Good to see you again.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, you got it, bud.